Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast of Growth to Togetherness. And today we have a special guest here. We welcome to our podcast series Josie Blümel as our special guest. So, hi, Josie, welcome.
Hi,
Hi, Josie. Good to have you.
thank you for the invitation.
Right, cool. So, thanks again for joining us in this conversation, Josie. And I will give a little bit of introduction for the audience on Josie. So she's a manager of account management and has a strong industry presence coming from real estate. Also expertise from the retail industry, always with a client-centric departments. So the ambition of her is to have an impact on people's life and to create for them a good experience / a moment they will remember. I love that, right? Because that's what building memories and moments is all about. She's passionate about intercultural management, psychology, and new ways of working. Excited to have you here, Josie, and looking forward to a great conversation. And today that will be on the podcast theme and topic of how to win customer loyalty. Really cool. And I think a very important topic, right? We talk a lot about getting in new clients and how we can make them happy. But how do you actually win that customer loyalty? So we will delve into that today. But before we start the conversation, we have a tradition. So could you tell us something people don't know about you?
I've been thinking about that question for quite a lot of time because I think I'm consider myself rather like an open book, which most of the time, most of the people that work in a customer service oriented department just naturally are. But I felt like there is, it's a tiny thing. For me, it means the world, but apparently the rest of the world makes it differently than I do. I have maybe the nervous tick a little bit that I can't have shoelaces hanging around the shoes. They need to be tucked inside. And I don't know what it is. And if you actually look at the advertisements, you never see shoelaces hanging out of the sneaker advertisement. So I really think that I'm right with my perspective. So that's something.
I've never noticed that.
Yeah. It just drives me nuts if they hang around. So it's like, yes.
Thanks for sharing that, Josie. I will probably never look at that thing now different in the way I've looked at it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No.
I recognize it from my son, by the way. He's 13 years old, and it's always in his shoes as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a thing, and just now, and also apparently I do the shoelaces differently than everyone else. I just do the rapid ears a little bit because I just can't do it how the general thing is. So yeah, me and shoelaces is a special topic. So
that will be another podcast then. Right?
Tune in next time.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Let's start. And I think, well, there's always something in your life that makes a change. And I wonder if you could mention one thing that changed your life, one milestone maybe?
Yes. So for me, that was actually a 5 months trip to Australia when I was 17.
Wow.
And it was kind of a progression that in Germany, you need to decide by the age of 12 to which high school you want to go to, whether you want to, want to go into science or want to go into languages, want to go into music. And it's an early year or an early age actually to define on which direction you want to go. And I literally went to have a look into each school and figured out, nope, I definitely don't want to do that. And in the end, I figured out what I really want to do is just different cultures. And I decided to go to a language school, but I never really wanted to become a translator. So it was still open. What am I going to do with that? And so by the age of 17, I decided to do just a semester abroad. And It changed me quite a lot, because I think it was just the first moment my suitcase was packed as if I would go to the moon. And after a 24 hours trip, you arrive on the other side of the planet and you realize, oh, they do have supermarkets, and oh, they do have shops as well. So yeah, it was just really, for me, the first time being far away, knowing that it wasn't an easy ride to get back home to mom and to dad, or like to the safe environment. And yeah, it was just also a different perspective on culture. Germans being very punctual, and the Australian time, I would say, time experience is a little bit different. So it was very good for me to just really kind of mix that all together within my own world, and broaden up my perspective as well. So that was a very decisive milestone, I think.
I think in such a situation, you really learn to trust on yourself
Yes,
and to
yes.
maybe to survive as well in a certain way, because you have to overcome all kind of situations.
So luckily enough, I had a host family that was really open, open to welcome me. And for the first time, I had two brothers. I'm an only child. They even had a dog, and called Sydney. I mean, what more do you want? And
Mm.
so that was really, I would say, a really good foundation to get used to that new environment and to get introduced into that new culture. So that was very
So,
helpful.
so that's your appetite for new ways of working.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Mm.
just really find your base, and then be open for new directions, I would say.
Mm. Nice.
Yeah, I love it. But I can imagine indeed it's the punctual versus the maybe a little bit of laid back culture from Australia. Is yeah, if you can mix that up, then that is a nice mix. Although,
It is, and a very easy example is actually that I always had a watch, and by the time I used to train to get to school all the time, and being in the train, I literally looked every 2 minutes on the watch, being like,
mm,
"Oh, I'm gonna be late. I'm gonna be
yeah,
late."
yeah,
Whereas with that Australian influence a little bit, you're like, you can watch like at your watch 1,000 times while being in the train. It won't make you any more punctual.
no,
You're gonna be
exactly.
late, full stop. And then also I didn't wear a watch like for quite a time after I came back, because I realized there's definitely a person around you that knows what time it is. And it worked out for quite a while. So and I lived an easier life, to be fair.
I can
Oh,
imagine.
nice. Can imagine. Yeah. So already two tips, I think, from the podcast, right? Shoelaces, watches.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So, but now it's really time to delve into the topic as well, right? I'm really looking forward to learn more on how to win that customer loyalty. So we actually go a little bit more into the growth fundamentals on this topic first. So the old game, as we would say, right, where separate entities within organizations are just basically chasing a revenue number. That's what we say goodbye to, right? We embrace actually the game of growth to togetherness and playing that. But playing the game of growth to togetherness means also assessing the way you serve your customers. So why do companies need to consider what customer loyalty actually means in your view, Josie?
I think first of all, where it starts for me is at least in the B2B world, we live in a world where everyone says, I do have a relationship with that client. And then it turns out they might have met once at an event for 5 minutes. So there's really the importance of how do you define relationship, and then also within your own company circle, how do you define customer loyalty? And for me, I think customer loyalty defines the framework of service that you want to provide as a company, because you need to know, how does a non-loyal client look like?
Mm-hmm.
How do we define a loyal client? Also, how do we win them back? And the customer loyalty in this part is then ultimately linked also to the customer lifecycle, because the more I put actually an effort into the loyalty of that client, the longer the customer lifecycle is going to be as well.
Yeah, I love
And
that, and I
that's
think it's an interesting point as well. What triggers me now, right? So we more and more, at least, we see a focus being set on so defining an ICP, right? So
yeah.
and there's variations, right? We see obviously in SaaS, right? We the three of us are part also of Pavilion, so community with growth leaders, and we see variations between ICPs, but the importance of setting it, that's almost like a no-brainer. But yeah, it triggers me also to define actually what is a loyal customer versus a non-loyal customer, and I think that's yeah, that's a very interesting one, Josie. And is that something you have? Is that common good, you would say, or is that something that is now becoming more like a foundational element for a lot of companies that want to improve there?
I think it's something where every company struggles with to define
Mm-hmm.
it. And I'm just going to give you a real-time example for me that I experienced this week. I went to the dentist to a treatment, and it was meant to be for an hour. And the woman literally took me throughout the whole process,
Mm-hmm.
communicated clearly, step by step, what she's doing, asked me multiple times how I'm doing, complimented me even during that time. And I just felt secure. And that is kind of that feeling, like I said it afterwards to the doctor. It was even, one could say, better than any Amazon delivery, because like based on the notifications
Yeah.
she gave me, I was with her on this journey, and I could prepare myself for the next steps and stuff like that. And that's something for companies, I think it's really to have that clear communication, to define those steps, and to take your client with you on that journey on what you're actually doing. Most of the companies, I would say, kind of rather tend into their internal worlds,
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to do what the customer wants, and then goes back and figures out, well, actually, we misunderstood it because we didn't ask a lot of questions, and maybe wasted 2 weeks on it. So that's something where I think there should be a little bit more, more process on really the emotional part, which maybe sometimes is not that easy to measure. But it's just because we're B2B doesn't mean that we can't deliver the same service as in the B2C world.
No, and
So
I love that one, because I think actually it's also in line with your what you mentioned, right? Your ambition. I think a moment they will remember, right? And that's
yes.
essentially what the people will remember, right? If you give them that feeling, and that's the emotional part of it, I would say.
And I think we Lisbeth and I once talked about it already, where it came to the service that you provide within a tech company. So it's the software world is set up in a way that, of course, they do have their notifications
Mm-hmm.
to send an email after 30 days, to send an email after 90 days, and then the onboarding is completed, full stop. Maybe
Mhm.
for some person, for the client, the
Mm-hmm.
onboarding stops already at 50 days. For another client, the onboarding actually stops at 120 days. And then there's this emotional part where your customer service department actually needs to step in to individualize your product.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not taken on that journey of why that software is helping my life, I'm going to go for another one.
Mhm.
And maybe try it out there. And it's just that connection part. It's not only for software, but it's also for other products, where it's the emotional part where people sometimes say, you know what, maybe the other product was better, but I have a good connection with you. You actually make my day fun. I'd rather go with you and maybe pay €5 more.
Exactly.
But with you, I have a good journey, and with the other ones, I'm not seeing it. So and that's, I think, is what everyone needs to figure out, is just how can you still individualize your service, to provide that loyalty, because loyalty is created by trust, in my opinion, and the trust you need to have internally within your team, but then also externally with the client.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because at the end, people do business with people, even in a B2B world. And building those relationships, and that comes with trust as well, is so important. And I read an article a few days ago. It was about you should be the best or the cheapest.
Yes.
But trying to be both is not going to work. So, and not being the cheapest is the worst choice probably, because tomorrow there's a cheaper one. So they leave. So, and when you're the best, then it's all about your service delivery and those relationships, and wanting to make a difference for your customer and in the best interest of the customer.
That's true, and I think it's also then relates a little bit to the question quantity versus quality.
Mhm.
And in the B2B world, let's be honest, I can't remember one company or that comes to my mind that has a contract life cycle of maybe 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Like in the B2C world, you maybe deal with the client maximum 6 weeks until their product has been delivered.
Yeah.
In the B2B world, we're mostly talking at least about a contract between 1 to 3 years. And if I already have at day one a critical relationship with that client, I might not going to be motivated for the next 364 days to actually go to work. So, and maybe neither does the other person. And that's something just from a personal perspective, how you need to create that environment that both parties can sit at a table, openly discuss what they need, what they can deliver, and then just work on a compromise. Of course, the one party needs to deliver the service, but it's in the end, it's also just make everyone's day a nice day as best as possible. And it's a long-term relationship, and doing a long-term relationship, that's where the loyalty gets created.
I
I
think
love it.
this brings us to the next topic, because this asks a different play in this game, because Jeroen was already talking about this togetherness part, pro to togetherness, and uh, it's our company's purpose as well, because it's not only about how you organize your things internally, like breaking those silos, building the bridges between all the departments, but also in terms of having the best interest for your customer. And so that togetherness piece is so much bigger than only your internal organization or your customer, also your investors, your social responsibility and so on. But if you look at the topic we are covering today, so in terms of this customer loyalty piece, what are the obstacles that make it difficult to make that change, do you think?
I think from the interpersonal connection, it's most of all like communication is the first answer everyone gives you, but in fact, I would say it's actually do not make assumptions. I have quite a lot of times where maybe my team comes to me and says, Josie, I need this, and then I'm like, why? Because the client said so. Yeah, but why do they need it? I don't know. And so this is just what is the actual intention, and I know there are different communication parts on, I don't know, it's asking the what questions 5 times until you actually end up to the result and stuff like that. Those easy methods that if you know them in the right situation, they're actually of use. So we're trying to train the team on the question of what's the ask, what does the client want, and also internally from our side, we're trying to work on that communication as well, because it facilitates everything. So, and you don't end up in that, I would say, therapy session where you say, okay, so back in 1852, this is what happened with the client. And so, first of all, do not make the assumptions. And then I think, second of all, it's also your product. I won't be able to just adjust my product to everyone's satisfaction, but I will be able to find the compromise. Most of the time I come with my product and I come with my systems, and the client comes with their systems, and maybe they're like 2 people. They can't communicate with each other. So we need to figure a way how to make that work for everyone. And that's something where you need to have the expertise as well. And then I think the other 2 points that I would have is just lack of probing. Just really ask the questions, be curious. I think it was Jane Fonda who once said, it's better to be interested than interesting. So
That's a good one.
Yeah.
it's a good one. And it's really something, just be curious. And it's also, you're going to learn from your clients on what they're dealing with at the moment. During, like, for the last 2 years, I went with my clients through a pandemic. And it was literally said by one client, it's like, Josie, to be fair, we wrote down something. It was never done before. I don't know if it's right, but maybe future generations can use it. And as long as you have that relationship to know that sometimes there are those moments where there isn't a right answer, that's where you like can actually work with it. And I think last but not least, don't forget the communication always happens on the listener's term. Just because you're saying something doesn't mean that the other person actually receives it in that way. And it's something where you always have to figure out, I don't know, did that other person actually understand what I wanted to say? And it's the other way around, to have that connection and to just work on the same focus, I would say.
Yeah, that's really a good one. In the course of Chris Voss, the FBI hostage negotiator, he said the mirroring part. I was really like,
Yes.
it feels so strange, like, kind of repeating your last words, but that also helps in making sure that you're on the same page and that you have the same understanding.
Yes, and I started trying to do that now with every meeting, just at the end, even though probably the client has expressed it already 3 times, just to repeat for myself to say, did I understand that correctly?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And it's also for myself a little bit like creating a to-do list to remember it again. So that's something which is very useful, and actually the client so far has appreciated just showing the structure. You also show confidence and structure to be like, these are the next steps that I need to do because of what you said. So that's very important, I think, and it's very useful.
I love that. And I think if I reflected to myself, for example, right, 2 to 3 years ago or so, I used a lot of the in checking if the client understood it, or someone internally I used, does that make sense? So I heavily needed to unlearn that, right? So obviously also these things come with a lot of unlearning and probably relearning as well. So at least that was my experience.
Yeah, and it's so hard to avoid the yes or no answer or question. So hard. It's so in your system saying, do we agree, or do you understand, or is it right? It's a kind of a speed in us, I think, that we don't take the time to kind of repeating the thing we agreed on or whatever.
Yes, no, I mean, if you say, do you understand, that other person is going to probably answer yes.
Yeah, exactly.
He understood it. He understood it in his terms. Both parties will leave this room and think, I'm pretty sure this, like, everyone knew what to do. And I can say I've experienced kind of an elevator pitch in our building here, where 2 different companies were in the same elevator and they connected. And the moment the first party went out, the second party said, so what's that guy's company he's working for? And you were like, this is it. This is exactly it. They did have probably a minute chat with each other.
Yeah.
And the first person goes out and thinks, oh my God, I made a connection now. Second person already forgot where this person is actually working. So that's so simple and so easy where the misunderstandings are coming from. And I think as long as everyone has that mindset to remember that there's also the other person that you need to adjust to, I think that can help a lot in the customer relationship.
Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely.
Great examples, and I think obstacles to overcome here that you shared. But if you make sure you can actually tackle those obstacles, there is a beautiful, wonderful world obviously in front of you, right? So if you would look at this, right? So and what are actually the key steps to take to really become customer centric in your view, Josie?
I think from my side, I've experienced this now as well. It's just really start from internally with your recruitment. figure out who's representing your company, especially when it comes to the customer service part. And it's just quite simple, just people that are naturally connectors already. And sadly enough, you have to say there are these people that are more talented in finance, and there are people that are more talented in customer service. Full stop. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
But I think it's also just your own mindset of, like, you're not going to find that perfect team and that perfect candidate, but you need to find that person that is able to represent your message, and the rest you can teach them. And so the general part is just have the right mindset to really have the customer first approach, because this is everything that matters. The customer is literally paying your salary. That's the way it is, and that's something that we should never forget. And then it's also have the right tools. And I mean with that, it's not only internally, but also externally. I need to be an expert in the product that I'm selling, but I also need to be an expert with the tools that I'm using to make sure that I can provide the best experience to the client. And then last but not least, have the right speed. I think, and I really want to go for this, provide a B2C experience in a B2B world. It is easier said than done, because there are multiple people involved internally in providing the right experience. We need to rely on the team that we have. If we don't have that, it's going to end up or trickle down in the end to the customer's experience. It's kind of the mirror in the end. But this just always be 2 steps ahead of your clients and make them look good, especially in a B2B world. It's all about the connection part and the networking part, and the better everyone can perform due to the experience that we provided, the better it gets, actually.
So you're more like a guide, right? You guide the customer, right?
Yes. I would say guide the customer, but also I think for me, this question was the most important one, and I actually came down, to be fair, if I would have the correct answer to that question, I could also play the lottery tomorrow. So I hope at least it gives someone a structure.
Everybody's finding a path, right? And I think this is this is the path you're taking, Josie. And thanks for sharing that. And there are numerous challenges along that road, probably, right? But if you have the mindset, like you said, I think that's so super important, right?
Exactly.
Because without the right mindset, it's hard to overcome the challenges that are probably ahead of you. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Another question for you. So what do you think the effect is of customer loyalty on commercial togetherness?
Trust. It's simple said as that. It's trust. And it's trust in the product that you provide. And also in the end, it's just also a more long-term and sustainable business model for yourself. I think it's just, if you put a focus on the quantity part and gaining a new customer all the time, you lose the mindset of keeping the customers that you have. And the more long-term and the more sustainable your business model is, the more creative you can also provide an environment for your own employees, because you're going to be a reliable partner for your employees as well, because there's a perspective. I think there maybe comes in the little twist of like being an enterprise and being startup. If I have the long-term and reliable environment, how can I still speed things up? How can I be creative? How can I be inventive? But I think to a certain extent, if you still allow that environment to happen, you motivate your people because they have the trust in you. They will also bring you back more input with new creative ideas and how to define the future together. And that's some really just doing, probably also being better able to do future forecasting for yourself, because it's a sustainable business model.
It's like a flywheel or something, almost, right?
Probably, I don't know, but it's no, I just think customer loyalty in the end, from a commercial perspective, is that you can better rely on what you do yourself. and that defines then the future, like that you feel comfortable. If you have a business model that you know yourself, it's maybe a niche product, or it's critical, or maybe it's I don't know, let's take for an example the COVID mask. That could be a business model for 2 to 5 years. Within the next 10 years, knocking on wood, it might just only be reliable or like suitable product for doctors, but not anymore for the whole population of this planet. So this is something where I think if you have that loyalty altogether, it can trickle down really to the fact that your business will be more stable in the end.
Yeah, you have a better balance, probably. But it's hard work because it's not so easy to get that in place. So it's kind of paying off at the end. And then it brings in the balance in your company because you have that sustainable environment.
Yes, and I think it's also hard to, I would say everyone should have it as a goal. The achievement is hard because the measurable part of customer loyalty is the tricky one to really give gratitude to customer loyalty of the business effect that you have in the end.
But yeah, you get more certainty for future forecasting, right? So that could be a trigger, right, to start doing this.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that also, Josie. So looking at this topic, what are your own top priorities connected to this topic?
For me, it's actually the most important one, and my team, if they're going to listen into this, probably going to laugh. It's providing an effortless experience, and that is based on the book called The Effortless Experience. And it inspired me because it literally said, of course, we have the customer success manager position. We have just in general, customer service is always on satisfying the client. But for instance, you can be happy with a 10% discount, whereas Lisbeth is happy with a 20% discount. How do we measure the individual component of customer satisfaction? And this book is rather focusing on the experience part, rather in a way of like, make it effortless. So if you haven't, like most of the time, customers don't call us for entertainment. Like I barely had a client that called me just to say, Josie, I wanted to wish you a nice day. And that's something that we shouldn't forget. We're there to support them and to fix things. And the approach in that book is actually just making it effortless. If the client just don't do any channel switching, if the client reaches you out or approaches you via email, stick with the email, and just really maybe have it within like 3 to 5 steps maximum solved. Because ideally, Lisbeth comes to me and says, Josie, I have this issue. I'm going to write down, I will definitely fix this for you. And within 3 days, I come back and be like, it's done. Have a nice day. However, if she needs 20 more emails, 3 meetings, and 5 calls, she's going to be like, wow.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
And so the more I deliver that effortless experience, the more trust will actually pop up, and the more loyalty will come around. It's all connected with each other, and that's why I like that book so much, because it made it quite simple and actually made it achievable, maybe also for the finance guy, to provide a nice customer service experience in the end. And another priority for me is also the objection handling part. Most of the time, it's really, as I said, we should find the compromise, but there's obviously that negotiation part included as well. So everyone's trying to make the best out of it. And I think there should be a level to understand to what extent you can also say no. Like just because we're providing a service doesn't mean that we always need to say yes to everything. Because if I'm saying yes and I can't deliver, that's not a great experience in the end. And then last but not least, it's project management in general. I found a great title actually saying project management for the unofficial project manager. And if we're honest, we're all unofficial project managers in the B2B world. And that's something that helped quite a lot, just to organize yourself as well. To how do you get yourself structured throughout the day? And the more I have everything under control, the more I will be able to trickle that down to the client as well. So these are the top 3 priorities in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Josie. And for the last one, would you recommend to have a watch or not for the project management?
I have to say, Mr. Apple actually got me with the Apple Watch, and it's quite helpful. So,
so sometimes it's about taking off that watch, right? But on the right moments.
Exactly. Yes.
And it will avoid a lot of stress as well.
Yeah, it's after, I think after 8 p.m. It's time to, once I have closed all the 3 rings, I'm good. So.
Good. Then we come to the last question, Josie. Could you give us 3 tips how to get started with a customer loyalty strategy?
Yes. The first one for me is define what customer service means to you. And then a simple tip is actually ask your team if they can remember a great customer service experience they had, and if they can remember a negative experience they had within the last 3 months. And most of them won't remember a good one, but they might remember a bad one. And that always helps as a starting point for me, just to figure out what was good and what was bad, and why they don't even remember. And that's number 1. Then number 2 would be also, how do you want to achieve what you aim for? So after you've defined what your service level should be, what do you need to make that possible? And then number 3 is, how do you maintain that service? You always need to make sure, of course, there's going to be rotation within your team. There's going to be rotation within the product, that you're always going to have a framework to make sure that you can provide a consistent service level. Those were the 3 tips, in my opinion. Love it.
Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And quite some stories and practical tips that you've shared, Josie. So super grateful for that. And I think we're looking back at a great conversation. I learned a lot myself as well today. And if I may wrap it up on the conclusion of this podcast, I think it's all connected, right? I think that's a very important aspect. From the mindset of your internal teams to creating that moments that customers actually will remember. And that's what how to win customer loyalty is actually all about. And thank you so much, Josie, for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. If you want to learn more, contact Josie on Blümel on LinkedIn. And thanks for listening in, everybody. And we see you next time.
Thanks a lot, Josie. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.